This lesson covers upgrading an existing domain to Windows Server 2012. The process is actually much simpler in Windows Server 2012. When you promote the first Windows Server 2012 domain controller into an existing domain, it will automatically prepare the forest, the schema, and the domain to accept a Windows Server 2012 domain controller. In the past, you had to do this manually. If you look at the source for your Windows Server 2012, you will see an AD prep folder under the support folder. This contains a number of files, schema files, which are basically updates to the schema in terms of objects and attributes. And you'll see an adprep.exe, and this supports 4 different switches. So typically, you're going to have to run forest prep. This prepares the schema to accept the changes required to support a Windows 2012 domain controller. It adds new objects and new attributes. This has to be run manually on the schema operations master for the forest. However, again, this will be performed for you if you're using Windows Server 2012. But if you prefer to run it manually, you can do this via the adprep/forest prep. This only has to be run once for the entire forest. There is also a domain prep. This has to be run once for each domain in the forest and must be run on the infrastructure operations master for the domain. Again, this is done automatically via the server manager for Windows Server 2012, but you can do it manually if you wish. And this just prepares certain security on objects to enable, again, Windows 2012 domain controllers. There are some older switches that were really required going from Windows 2003 and introducing Windows 2008. For example, we have the GP prep switch. This was required when going to Windows 2003, which sets some different security on group policy objects. But if you've already run this when you went to Windows Server 2003, you don't need to run it again. We also have the RODC prep switch. This has to be run once for the entire forest. And if you've already run this as part of the Windows Server 2008 upgrade, you don't have to run it again. So you can run all these switches manually. The only requirement to be able to add new domain controllers, running for example Windows Server 2012 into a Windows 2008 existing AD, is you must run the forest prep and the domain prep, and then you can have that coexistence with no challenge. Once you migrate all your domain controllers to Windows Server 2012, then you would want to upgrade the domain and the forest level to Windows Server 2012. My recommendation is typically not to upgrade domain controllers. If you have a domain controller running Windows Server 2008, rather than do an in-place upgrade, i.e. install Windows Server 2012 on top of that domain controller, I would instead stand up a brand new operating system running Windows Server 2012, run DC Promo on it, promote it to a domain controller, and then if there were FSMO roles on that 2008, I would migrate them over to my 2012, and then decommission that 2008 box. Obviously make sure I have global catalog set, etc. It just gives you a much cleaner experience. Ideally, you should not be running other services on your Active Directory domain controllers, except DNS, so there shouldn't be challenges with having to migrate other services over as well. Keep your domain controllers clean. They should be running AD and DNS, and not really anything else. I've heard a great saying before, treat your domain controllers like tin soldiers. If one falls down, you just stand up another one in its place. They should be disposable. So don't install lots of other services on your domain controllers. It will really simplify your whole management and upgrade process.